In this video, you're going to learn 5 ways to smoothly transition between worship songs. And in this video, I wear a pink shirt. Coming up. Hey everyone, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. If you want to find those tips, head over to Instagram or Facebook at Leading Worship Well, where I'm posting new worship leading tips, just like the ones I'm about to share every single day. But you're here on YouTube, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button down below, and let's get into it, because today we're learning how to smoothly transition between worship songs. And this is one of the hardest things to wrap your mind around. Even whenever you first start leading worship, you might not even be thinking about it, because whenever we first start leading worship, we start and we just pick a bunch of songs and we don't really consider how they work together. But as you move deeper into the worship leading experience and start to get some of the fundamentals under your belt, you move into deeper understanding and you realize these songs, they need to work together. And that means a bunch of different things. That means thematically. That means also, though, musically. How are you going to create these transitions between these songs so that it makes sense and it's not just one song, stop, one song, next? That's distracting when you've got dead air between songs. So we want to come up with some ways that we can eliminate that dead air and create smooth transitions between worship songs. So I'm going to share with you these 5 ways to do that. Let's get into number 1. This is the first and really the easiest way that you can smoothly transition between worship songs, and it doesn't really take any preparation. You just do this. You put all of your songs in the same key. You put every song that's beside each other in the same key. Now, there's a problem with that we're going to get into in a minute, but if you could do that, that would be one way to create smooth transitions, because really the problem between transitioning between songs is that the ear has to be prepared for a new key. So there's 2 ways that we can fix that problem. Number 1, we prepare the ear for the new key. We're going to get into that in these next 4 ways to do it. But the most obvious way is to never change keys, so that you don't even have to think about preparing the ear for the new key. So if you wanted to do all the songs in the same key, it would look something like, let's say you pick the key of G, and maybe you start out with 10,000 Reasons. I don't know, I'm just picking random songs. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. You know that song, and then let's say you end that song. I'll worship your holy name. I will worship your holy name. And okay, the next song's in G. Let's say it's How Great Is Our God, because that's like the most popular song in the world. You just go straight into it. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty. You know how it goes. Let's say you get to the end of that song. We want to create a smooth transition. Let's say we do the song Forever. We sing Hallelujah by Carrie Job. Once again, we do it in G. How great is our God. And something like that. You'd sing it appropriately though. And then we go straight into Forever. Right? There's no need to prepare our ear for the new key, because we're just in the same key. And you go straight in. The moon and stars, they wept. The morning sun was dead. You get the idea. All right, so that's the most obvious way, and this is kind of where most worship leaders start to dip their toe into creating smooth transitions, when they realize, hey, these songs, and it might be by accident at first, but they realize these songs are in the same key, so I can just flow right into the next one. You got to make sure that the tempo kind of matches too, but just flows right into the next one. So this is where most people start, and it's still a valid way to do it. I still do that. periodically throughout the set. Now, I mentioned a problem with it though at the beginning of when I shared that way to smoothly transition between keys, and that is that if you're doing like 4 songs on a Sunday, 6 songs on a Sunday, however many songs you do, or if you're just leading at a worship gathering and you're doing like 12 songs, number one, you don't want to do all the songs in the same key, because then it's just going to sound like the same thing over and over again. But number two, if you watched my video from last week, how to put your songs in a singable key, you might realize that you can't put 2 songs in the same key, because one song will work in the key of G, for example, but the next song that you want to do will be way too high in that key. So keep that in mind. You can put your songs in the same key, and you probably will have songs in the same key in your set. But now let's get into the next 4, which is like, what do you do whenever you actually have to change keys between songs? And here's what you do. I'm going to share, there are 4 ways here now left that you can smoothly transition, not just between songs, but really between keys. And here is the second way to create smooth transitions between your worship songs. And this is the traditional way. This is what a lot of people will tell you. And so obviously there's some validity to it. It definitely works. And that is to use the 5/7 chord of the new key that you're going into to prepare the ear for that new key. Now, if that didn't make any sense to you, let me share an example and it'll make more sense. So let's say we want to go from the key of G to the key of D. Pretty simple, all right? G to D. So if we want to move from the key of G to the key of D, we have to think, remember, we're using the 5/7 chord of that new key that we're going into, which is D. So you've kind of got to know the Nashville number system. If you want to know Nashville, if you want me to explain the Nashville number system, I don't have time in this video, but leave a comment below. That might be a video for a future video idea. So you got to know that, or you at least have to know the 5/7 chord. So if we're going from G to D, the 5/7 chord in the key of D is an A7. A is the 5 chord, a 5/7 chord is the A7. So if we're transitioning from G, let's get our ear. Remember, we're preparing our ear for the new key. So let's get our ear in the key of G first. Alright, so we are firmly in the key of G now, but we want to transition to D, so we have to, it doesn't really matter when, we just have to hit that 5/7 chord of the new key. So here it is, A7. Now we're in the key of D. Got it? We just hit the 5/7 chord in the new key, and then we just transitioned to the new key. It prepared our ear. The A7, that doesn't really fit in the key of G necessarily, but when you're transitioning to D, it does. Let's do the same thing if we're going from G to E. So in the key of E, the 5/7 chord is a B7. So let's hear what that sounds like. Once again, back to the key of G, transitioning to E this time. Gotta hit that B7 to get to E. Here it is. Right into E. Alright, ended on a G chord. That didn't sound good because I didn't prepare your ear for it. So I hope that makes sense. This is also called modulating. So it's this idea that you want to prepare the ear for the new key, and there's way more to it than simply playing the 5/7 chord. There's like a bunch of progressions that you can play leading up to the new key that will properly prepare the ear for the new key. So if you want to explore that idea a little bit deeper, just look up modulating and you'll find a bunch of chord progressions. Now, I personally don't use this method that often because it doesn't sound particularly pleasing to my ear, especially on a guitar. I think it works a little bit better on a keyboard, but I don't know, just something about it sounds like cheesy, like 90s worship to me. I don't know, which I love 90s worship, but it kind of sounds dated to me to hit the 5/7 chord, and I think there are a few better ways that we can smoothly transition. But know that that is an option. Use the 5/7 chord of the new key to prepare the ear for that new key and then transition into it. On to number 3, and this is what I use most frequently. So number 1, we put our songs in the same key. But number 3, if you want to smoothly transition, you can put your songs in similar keys. So not the same key, but similar keys. And what that word similar means is that the keys share common notes. So if you look at all the notes in the major scale of a certain key and compare that to another key, they would share a lot of common notes between those two scales. And once again, I'll give you an example. Remember, we're putting our songs in similar keys, and the best way to find a similar key, if you just want a quick rule of thumb to do it, is to use the 4 chord of the current key that you're in, and that will be a similar key to the one that you're in right now. So for example, the key of E, the 4 chord in the key of E is the key of A, or is the chord A, and the key of A has a lot of similar notes as the key of E. Same thing with, let's say, G. If we want to go from G, the 4 chord would be a C, so G and C share some similar notes. Same thing with D, 4 chord of D is G, so those share similar notes. And that's just sort of a rule that you can follow. So if you want to, just a quick way to think about that, that's how you can think about that when you're planning your set list, so that not all of your songs are in the same key, but they can be in similar keys. So let's see what that sounds like. And I'll just use a quick example from what we're doing on Sunday, because this one, like I said, is what I use most often. Apart from putting the songs in the same key too, I use that one a lot. But this one, I use this one pretty frequently, even this Sunday. So this Sunday, we're doing the song "It Is Finished" by Passion Band. And then the chorus is, "It is done, it is finished, Christ has won. He is risen, grace is here, love has triumphed over death forever." Alright, so we are in the key of F right now, playing D shapes in with a capo 3. So key of F. Now a similar key to F, the 4 chord of F, is a B flat. Transition in your mind for the capo usage, and that would mean that we have to play G shapes now, because that would put us in the key of B flat. I hope that makes sense. Alright, so we just transitioned from D, let's just pretend like we're not using the capo, from D to G. All you have to do is go straight into the song, because these are similar keys. So your ear is already pretty much prepared for it, because there are so many similar notes in the key. So let's pretend we just ended "It Is Finished" by Passion, and we end on a D. All right, our ear is focused on those notes. Now we're going to go into the next song, and let's say it's in B flat. Alright, there's no harshness in those key changes because they share a lot of similar notes. And you can do, let's say we want to go to the key of C now after this song, and we end this song in B flat. Alright, this is B flat. Now to C, straight away. Don't need to prepare our ear really at all. that's the quick and fast rule, is you just transition. If you want to pick a similar key, it's the 4 chord of the key that you're in, and then you can move to that key. So A is the 4 chord, so you can go from E to A, you can go from F to B flat, you can go from D to G, from G to C, any key you want. If you want to pick a similar key and not have to really think about the transition, that's how you can do it. And that's what I use probably most frequently when I'm trying to match up song keys. So that's number 3. Now, what if you want to transition to a key that isn't similar, it's not the same, and it doesn't sound particularly good whenever you go to like the 5-7 chord, like we talked about when modulating keys? Well, my recommendation is, and this is something else that I do often, and not something that people really recommend whenever they're talking about creating smooth transitions. But number 4, if you want to smoothly transition between worship songs, just do it. Just transition. You don't have to have some long, complicated equation figured out how to prepare people's ear for it. Sometimes there's benefit in just simply moving to the new key. So let me think of a key that doesn't work at all. There's not really a good way to do it, and usually those are like half steps apart or something crazy. But let's just say G to B flat, right? If we were to just go, here's G, and we try to flow into B flat, listen to how this sounds. Alright, that sounds horrible, right? But if we do it intentionally, it can actually sound good. And creating a smooth transition doesn't always mean eliminating all the dead space. Sometimes it just means minimizing the dead space. So whenever you are just doing it and just switching between keys, you just have to be intentional with that time and try to minimize it as much as possible. So I'm even going to throw a capo on to get to B flat. Here's my capo up here. You can't see it, it didn't show up, but you'll see it whenever I put it on here. All right, so listen, let's go, how great is our God, to, I don't know, it doesn't really matter what song we go to, but we'll be in the key of B flat after that. All right, so here's G. We're just going to transition to B flat. How great is our God. G, let it ring out. Now we want to be intentional. There's some dead space there, but it's all right. And now we're in the new key. So it doesn't sound that pleasing to the ear, but it doesn't always have to flow smoothly into it. Or I guess it's still smooth, but not in the way that we would normally consider it smooth. So sometimes you just do it, and it's fine. Like, it's okay to switch between keys that don't have common notes. You just do it, and even in that, it's almost like there's more intentionality in that moment, because you're making a statement that this is now a different song. I think sometimes, at least with my church, I find that my church kind of gets confused when we just flow into one song, into the next song, into the next song, and it's like so cohesive that they get lost and that we're like in this new song. I hope that makes sense. But I feel like that happens at my church, so sometimes it's just good to completely reset, and you don't always have to prepare the ear for the new key. You just do it. You just transition into the new key. And the key is to do it intentionally, not to eliminate all the dead air between the songs, but to minimize that dead air. The dead air is still there. Sometimes that silence is valuable. So just do it. Now, that was number 4. Number 5 kind of plays into the idea of just doing this, but we're going to add something this time that just smooths it out a little bit more. And whenever I transition and just do it between keys, I usually incorporate this, and that is that you can use pads to fill in those spaces. So pads are just like these ethereal sort of keyboard synthesizer tones, if you're not familiar with them, that sit under the mix and they fill in the space. So you can't even really hear them if you're doing it correctly, and you're not listening for them. You won't really hear them, but they fill in the space. And what can happen at the end of a song, you'll hear an example of a pad here in a second, but you'd end a song. Let's say we want to go from the key of G to the key of F, all right? So we'll end the song in G. Once this chord stops ringing out, we'll fade up the pad, which you'll hear right now, and we'll go to the key of F. I'm going to do that again and just let you hear that complete transition. And if you want to see the setup for pads that we use at my church, you can check that out. I talked about it in this video here where I took you on a tour of my church as well. I hit on it briefly there. If you want to see it more in depth, I'll probably make a video about just the pad setup in the future, because I think that that's pretty beneficial for people. There'll also be some links to some free pads that you can download and incorporate into your worship leading in the description below. But let's hear this one more time, all right? I'm going to end the song in the key of G and let the last chord ring out. And when it just stops playing, we're going to fade in, and I'm doing this because I use a volume pedal to fade in the pad, but we're going to fade in the pad and just hear how we're still changing keys. There aren't a ton of similar notes between these two keys, but it still sounds good because that pad fills in the space and, once again, sort of prepares our ear for the new key. So here it is. So I hope you heard how a pad sort of softens that blow of just doing it. So if you can get a pad set up in your church, like the one that I talked about in that video I pointed out earlier, I definitely recommend that. That will help to create smooth transitions between your keys. So there are 5 ways right there that you can smoothly transition between worship keys. Some of it takes music, what is the word I'm looking? I want to say theology, but that's about God. I can't think of the word. Music, like understanding, theory, music theory. That's what it is. Music theory. Some of it takes that. Some of it is just being intentional about your transitions, and all you have to do is make the commitment to transition between keys as intentionally as you possibly can. So I hope that was helpful. Once again, my name is Spencer Cormany from leadingworshipwell.com. I'd love to connect with you over on Instagram or Facebook at leadingworshipwell. Oh, also, I put together a free audio training for you called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. If you want to check that out, head over to my website. Links in the description below. leadingworshipwell.com. You'll find it there. It's called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading, and it's all about just like 5 simple tips. They're pretty simple, but a lot of people miss them. They're 5 simple tips that will, if you just are conscious of them and apply them to your leading, then you will be better at leading worship. They will improve your worship leading. So make sure you check that out at leadingworshipwell.com. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll catch you in the next one. Keep leading worship well.